I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear. The thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Something significant had happened, and there would be a verdict. So the jury of 3 men and 3 women deliberated about an hour on Tuesday, 6 hours on Wednesday and Thursday, and less than an hour this morning before returning their verdict. Michelle Troconis, with her family, her parents and her sisters sitting in the courtroom directly behind her, she hung her head and started to sob. And as soon as the final guilty verdict was announced on the hindering charge, she dropped into her chair. She put her head down on the table. Her co-defense attorney, Audrey Felson, was patting her and rubbing her on the back. Some of the family and friends of Michelle Troconis also reacted emotionally. And then
Okay, so we're going to look at some of the reactions from the family, and then we're going to look at the actual verdict. Hi guys, welcome to the verdict of the Michelle Troconis trial. Conspiracy to commit murder carries the same sentence effectively as murder. So a really big deal. This is the camera crews gathering after the verdict, and we're about to see her father, her sister, and I think her mother tell us what they think about that verdict. I think you get a little bit of a sense of Michelle herself through her sister and through her family. Not to say that no one would be emotional under these circumstances, but they certainly seem to be an emotionally expressive family, put it that way.
Good morning. Good afternoon, sorry. Well, today I'm going to talk in name of my family. It's hard to me because English is not my first language. I came many years ago to this country looking for opportunities, freedom, and justice. And I moved my whole family here. I have 8 grandchildren, American, and today we are here devastated because has been a tremendous injustice in the trial of my daughter.
So, if you think about this case, Jennifer DULOS murdered, her husband took his own life, and you then also have the loss, in a way, of a third person, the mistress. This is still not over because the lawyer, Kent Mawini, has still got to be tried, right? And beyond all of that, you kind of have how many children? 6 children effectively that have lost their parents. 6 children. So this is a huge tragedy, no matter which way you slice it. And I couldn't help feeling when I watched the verdict, just a very sad feeling for Jennifer DULOS. Like, this is all so unnecessary. And the people who did this, I don't know, just unbelievable.
She's innocent, and we will keep proving that forever. I forgive the juries, the judge, and the prosecutors, and God will prevail the truth. Also, I think that the influence of the media has been having tremendous effects on this case. Thank you.
This is definitely a devastating day because my sister is innocent of all the charges that she was convicted of. And we are certain that she is innocent. And I know that only time will prove it to you guys. I know that everyone wanted answers. I know that maybe the state is happy that they finally convicted her or someone is paying for the price, but she's not the right one. We still don't know what happened to Jennifer. We're all mothers and we all love, as you can see, Michelle has been supported by us, her family and friends from day one. And we
So, can you guys see the irony? Thanks a lot, Faticus, for that. Thanks so much. What does justice for her kids look like? Um, can you see the irony in the family addressing the media and saying it's the media that caused this distortion? You would kind of think that if the media were trying to make it look like something, well, then they wouldn't have any mics out for the family to sort of broadcast their criticism, including of the media. So, I mean, what do you think of that? Anyway, let's hear a little bit more.
continue standing here because we too care to know the truth of what happened to Jennifer, but we don't know what happened to Jennifer. And choosing and putting my sister as the guilty person is not the right thing to do because she's innocent.
Now, the weird thing about this case is it kind of has a similarity to the Russ incident, um, where you have someone who is associated with something, with an incident, but then there are also other people that are associated with it, perhaps even more associated with it, right? In this case, Michelle Troconis didn't pull the trigger, and I know it's not a gun likely wasn't used here, but what I mean is Michelle Troconis, didn't pull the trigger. She didn't. There was no. She didn't probably handle a murder weapon. She didn't commit the murder. In the same way that Hannah Gutierrez didn't pull the trigger. But what did she do? What was her proximity? Why is her DNA on the garbage bags with Votus's and Jennifer's? So I must say, I thought this is a really tough case for a jury, and I commend the jury for getting this right. But it's not necessarily over. There could be an appeal, and cases that are sort of iffy. If the prosecution just scrapes through, they can sometimes be won on appeal. Will this one? I guess we'll see. It's not as though she was found innocent on any of the charges.
So we will appeal and we will not stop fighting for her justice that this so country has apparently promised to us because as an American myself, this is an injustice completely. So my sister will eventually come out. She has to because she's innocent of everything that she's been charged for.
Thank you. I just want to, like they said, I'm the mother. I'm devastated, and she's innocent, and I know that. My heart knows that she doesn't have anything to do, and the mystery will continue because to put her in jail doesn't. It's not that Jennifer appeared. No, nobody still knows what happened to her, but she's not the one that knows. She never knew. She's innocent, and that's it. Thank you.
My sister is innocent. And this wasn't a fair trial. And you all know that. You all know. Look inside your heart. The media from day one, attack us, harass us. Okay, you, probably the moms out here know. My sister doesn't know what happened to Jennifer. We want to know. We pray every night for the 5 children. I met them. I know them.
So just I don't mean to be mean, but this is again just a sense of a very emotional family, right? Certainly, this sister very very emotional, and is Michelle very emotional. And if you take that into this case, is that a potential answer? Someone who got very emotional about a very acrimonious divorce, someone who got very emotional about um, having to be kicked out of her own home whenever the kids came to visit. Um, to me, it's incredible that you can say something like she's innocent of everything when you can clearly see that there were some uh, lies. Lies were told. Statements like that bitch should be buried next to this dog. That's to me not innocent. I'm not saying that makes you a murderer, although in this case, doesn't it? But what I am saying is, I really don't think you can sort of wave a flag and say she's completely innocent. Um, she was with Fotis every step of the way. And one of the things that I found really compelling was how long she stayed in the relationship with Fotis after um, Jennifer was murdered. I found that really interesting.
They are beautiful kids. So is my niece. She was never separated from my mom, from my sister, my niece. It's my sister. It's all her world for my niece. Have some compassion. I mean, your heart. Look inside your heart. We cannot live in a world with this much hate. My sister's innocent. This is wrong. This wasn't a fair trial from day one. Wasn't a fair trial. And you all know that because you are parents, you are moms, you are grandparents. Please look inside your heart. This world needs more love. And this is wrong. What happened to my sister today is wrong. It wasn't a fair trial. It wasn't.
So again, very intense emotion there, anger, but there's also what she says there that I think is true. Is I think the instrumental word here is hate. I think somebody hated Jennifer, and who did have cause to hate Jennifer. Anyway, let's see if anyone else speaks.
My last words go to Petros, Christiane, and all the 5 children. I don't recall the names right now. I personally have been praying for you every day, mornings and night. I'm sorry about what happened to your mommy, but my sister is not the answer. And I hope that when you grow up, you find your own means to know what happened, to seek for the truth, to seek for real justice. This is devastating. And I said since the first time, this is a tragedy for all the families involved and for all our children too.
Thank you.
Hi, I will say something.
Okay.
Hi. Ask yourself,
I think this is her friend talking.
why they didn't interview the only person that was with Michelle the day that everything happened. Why they didn't interview the person that was with her the day that she was first arrested? Why the police didn't interview me after I was in the timeline? Why they didn't interview me when I was in the warrant? It's not a coincidence.
Hmm.
Dr. Carlos Troconis.
I think that is a reference to Kent Mawini. Why did they not have Kent Mawini? I think that's what she's saying. Why did they not have him on the stand? I think it's because he elected not to testify for either side. Also, he has his own case. She may also have meant, why didn't they interview him? Not sure if she means in terms of the court testimony or the police. I'm not quite sure what she means. Okay, shall we hear what Schoenhorn says? Funny enough, I heard someone refer to him as Schoenbridge or something. Obviously the wrong reference to him, but that's where the media did get something wrong.
I'm truly disappointed in this verdict. I don't believe that this was the correct verdict. I'm not going to criticize this jury that sat through 6-7 weeks of evidence and reached their determination. I just happen to disagree with their determination. To answer another question that hasn't been asked, Michelle is devastated. Her daughter has been informed. Her daughter was not here. Her whole family is devastated. I heard some of what they said. I've been doing this a long time, and it's not like I'm cynical or hard-boiled about this, but I truly just don't see how the jury could have reached this verdict. We intend to first file post-trial motions. One of them is going to be for a judgment of acquittal notwithstanding the verdict. And there will be many, many issues we'll present even before sentencing. We'll also be preparing for sentencing. There's a lot of support. Michelle has a lot of support. And people will be submitting letters, and we'll be preparing for a May 31st court date. So if people have questions, I'll answer a few, although I don't really feel like it.
That's saying it. So we'll come back to this, but I don't know what you guys think about his defense. It sounds like he felt like he had a strong defense. I don't know whether the family sitting in court watching the trial felt like he had a fantastic defense. I didn't. I found his defense annoying, kind of doesn't achieve very much, long-winded, repetitive, ineffective for the most part. Whereas I wouldn't say, it's not just because he's the defense attorney, I wouldn't say the same about Jason Bowles in the Rust case. I wouldn't say he's ineffective. I'd say he's very effective, although he is repetitive. I would say Jason Bowles is his arguments have been smart. Anyway, let's go to the actual.
Well, to answer the question that.
Let's go to the actual.
Good evening to you both. Yeah, after.
The actual verdict. Do I have it here? Let me just make sure I've got it. That's not it. Sorry, I thought I had it, but this is the short version, obviously.
2 full days of deliberations with an extra hour and a half today. The jury found Michelle Troconis guilty unanimously on all 6 counts. Now, as that verdict came down, the emotions in the courtroom were palpable, with Michelle putting her head in her hands.
Your Honor, the jury has reached a unanimous verdict for all 6 counts.
A moment nearly 5 years in the making.
Will the defendant, Michelle Troconis, please rise and face the jury?
One by one, the court clerk reading through the charges, with the jury's foreperson dictating their decision.
What say you, Mr. Foreperson? Is she guilty or not guilty of the first count of the information charging the defendant with conspiracy to commit murder?
Guilty.
Guilty on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit tampering with physical evidence, 2 counts of tampering with physical evidence, and hindering prosecution, all in connection to the death of Jennifer Farber-DULOS, a mom of 5 who police say was murdered by her estranged husband, Fotis Doulos, on May 24th, 2019.
Now, I have to say, the thought occurred to me, I don't know about you guys, when the deliberations went into the 3rd day, and one of the questions they asked was they wanted to hear from the friend again. I kind of thought, uh-oh. And the fact that I think, wanted clarification on the evidence tampering. When I heard that, I was a little bit concerned. I do think if the jury deliberations went over the weekend, that would have been a sign of either a hung jury or something else. I do think the fact that the weekend is looming kind of got the jury to sort of commit. I think that was a factor. Do you guys agree?
With his then girlfriend, Trichonis, helping him cover it up.
Rise and remain standing.
Trichonis with her head in her hands, crying as she's consoled by her attorneys.
Conditions.
Court will impose the following.
Before being taken out of the courtroom in handcuffs with her family and friends, saying their goodbyes from afar.
Now, the crazy part is, if you watch this verdict, you never really got to see Michelle Trichonis' face. Because number one, her lawyer stood in the way of the camera, blocking her appearance. And when she was kind of escorted out, she never actually got to see her face, even when the sort of admin was discussed afterwards. She kind of had her head on the table with her hair spread out like that. So I found that really strange, just the fact that we can't even see, because of it's been set up like that, you can't even see her reaction. And another big difference between this courtroom with just the one camera angle and the courtroom in Santa Fe. Ron says, I like that judge.
All his prosecutors pleaded with the judge to revoke her right to bail out.
At this point, the state is moving the court to revoke the defendant's bond, or in the alternative, at a minimum, double it.
The judge answers the call.
$6 million cash assurity.
All as
So I don't know if you saw her there with her head sort of flat down, you know. So you never actually get a sense of her reaction in terms of on her face to this verdict.
All as defense attorney John Schoenhorn gets ready to make his next legal move to reverse a decision he feels the jury got wrong.
Truly disappointed in this verdict. I don't believe that this was the correct verdict. I'm not going to criticize this jury that sat through 6-7 weeks of.
Okay, so let's go back to the question Q&A with Schoenhorn.
Well, the first step is to file post-trial motions for new trial, where I list any number of reasons why the trial itself was not fair.
So do you guys know how an appeal works? If let's say the defense aren't happy, in other words, you would tend to appeal if you have or you would basically put forward a motion to appeal. You would, if you're getting a verdict that you're unhappy with. Now, to appeal doesn't just mean you get the appeal. You basically say what is defective about all sorts of things, the procedure, the way, was there bias from the judge overruling you? Was there evidence presented by the prosecution that should not have been allowed? Were you prevented from providing evidence? And one of the best ways of getting an appeal is if new evidence comes through in the fullness of time. Let's say Jennifer's body is found. And there's something in it that is exculpatory or potentially exculpatory that could change something. But it's really not saying that I'm going to appeal doesn't mean that you will be granted an appeal. For example, Caitlin Armstrong has said that she wants to appeal. Well, you're going to have to base it on something. Courts don't just hear things all over again willy-nilly. There must be a strong reason. The other reason trials are so anal and why there's so much careful posturing in court is to ward off the possibility of an appeal for the opposing counsel. So I don't know if you follow what I mean. If you're not thorough in your opposition to something, or you're not thorough in presenting your case, then in an appeal situation, you can find reasons that there's not enough foundation for something. You understand? And so when you're presenting your case, you also want to present it in a watertight way that it can't be appealed. Otherwise, you've wasted your time. You know, if you present a case and then it's just overturned on appeal, well, then you really did waste your time.
Some of the issues predate the actual trial, going back to the hearings that took place in the fall, some of the rulings that go back a couple of years.
Thanks,
So
Penelope.
it's going to be
Thanks, Earth.
a post-trial motion that lists all of those things. Normally, those are pro forma, meaning you file it just to file it. I believe that many of those issues have merit, and only if those are denied and Michelle is sentenced, you then file an appeal. And the question is, what do you argue on appeal? In my view, it's not just whether there are any issues, it's which ones not to argue because of how many errors I think there were in this process. It appears that the amount is too high for the bondsman to be able to post without getting additional surety approval. So it appears she will not be getting out today. We hope that she'll be getting out in the next few days, but it's not going to happen today. She is going to be going to York and Niantic. I don't want to even speculate. The maximum penalty has been set forth, but you know, it's somebody with no criminal record. She is not accused of herself of harming anybody, but it's serious charges that she's been found guilty of. So it could be several years. Let me put it that way.
Several years, geez.
Well, I thought that the question of when they wanted to hear back from Clara Duperon was favorable. The way, though, that
I also thought it was. I must say, when I heard that they wanted to hear someone who was sympathetic to Michelle, I thought, uh-oh.
they asked the question, did the jury feel that you actually had to physically touch any of the items in order to be guilty of tampering? I didn't particularly like that question, but as I think I said yesterday, because the definition of accessory was separated from the charges of accessory to commit an offense, I thought it could be neutral. So I don't speculate and go, oh, that's a good question, that's a bad question. You know, you could sit there all night and think, well, why are they asking that question? It could be one person wanted to know.
Welcome,
They just
Teresa.
didn't know that the statute 53A-8 meant accessory. The only other thing that if I can, you know, I have a wider audience here, is that people, in my view, should never sit down with the police for an interrogation. They should never do it, because people forget it's not just things that are bad that can be used against you, it's anything can be used against you. And that's what I feel was done here.
Do you have any insight on the strategy that was in play at that time in June of 2019?
I have no insight as to why any lawyer, without either an immunity agreement or a proffer agreement, would walk their client into a police interrogation without knowing very much about the offense. Now, that's...
I must say that did kind of surprise me, the way her lawyer just mostly sat there inert. Like you almost felt like he wasn't there.
Me. So you might want to ask the lawyer that did that. At least we know one other lawyer that, for Mr. Gumieni, got an immunity agreement in order to have his client cooperate. That is the strategy that would have been the more appropriate, in my view. Again, reasonable action for a lawyer to take. But you're going to have to ask that attorney why he did what he did. In my view, the entire case, and even as closing argument set forth, was based on what she said to the police during these hours and hours of interrogation. And I guess the jury did not accept the fact that people are not fluent in English.
I think that's bogus, that you can excuse what she said by saying she doesn't speak English very well. She spoke English well enough to write those alibi scripts and to know what to leave out. I do think that this case may have a bearing, not a bearing, but it may provide some insight into the Rust case, in the sense of, aren't Hannah's own words also in those double interrogations, aren't those going to play a huge role in convicting her? Aren't they? Are they or aren't they? I would also say that what I thought the closing arguments did fantastically well was, and I've done this myself, so I know it's a shitload of work, is basically getting those key statements, right? In other words, getting the script of it, and then finding the actual audio of it and matching those, and then doing that and juxtaposing that statement with its inconsistency, juxtaposing one statement with its inconsistent statement, and doing that in a prioritized way. So you don't just find inconsistencies, you find the most important inconsistencies, and you play them, you hear them, and then you hear the statement being made in an inconsistent way. And that counts for so much more than saying someone made an inconsistent statement. When you hear it, when it's demonstrated, so much more powerful, right? And so if the lawyers in the Rust incident do something like that, I think it'll be very effective. We'll see if they will.
Or who are tired, who are badgered, are told lies, and then asked to, now what do you think? Now are you willing to admit that you didn't act truthfully before? You can draw negative adverse inferences from that. Just in my view, it shouldn't be enough to find someone guilty. But again, that's my view.
The other thing that I found a little bit sly and crafty in this case was the whole thing of hearing, needing to have the trial translated, that contrivance. I mean, when her family spoke, her father, her mother, and her sisters, they all spoke English, right? What I'm trying to get at is that whole thing, I didn't believe. I didn't believe that she needed that translated. And so having that whole contrivance there the whole time, I don't actually think helped her. It made me more suspicious of her. The other thing that I noticed was, I think on the one trial day that she came in, she actually wore blue, like royal blue. When they asked for the friend's testimony to be heard. But other than that, she wore beige. Once again, on the verdict day, she looked like she wore a cream-colored thing. I don't know. I just also found that contrived. She didn't look like the Michelle Troconis that lived in Connecticut. She looked like Michelle Troconis on trial via defense attorney. And I think that's going to count 10 times more against Hannah Gutierrez. I think they could have changed her appearance somewhat, but not as drastically as they have. But I don't know. Who knows? Who knows whether it'll work? Okay, so let's take another question. I think he was asked to comment on, was this a fair trial? What do you think? Was it a fair trial?
It is not for me to decide whether a trial is fair or not. I believe these jurors were fair based on the evidence that was allowed to come in and the way that things were instructed.
That's quite an interesting statement that he's saying basically the trial based on what was in the trial was fair. That's quite an interesting concession.
My issue will be whether or not the rulings that allowed in certain evidence, that allowed in hearsay, in my view, were incorrect, and therefore there was a due process violation and errors that would entitle Michelle to a new trial. But I'm not going to get into questions of fairness and whatnot. That's not really my role.
Really interesting question. How do you feel now that you've lost on all the charges? Should she have taken the stand? Great question. How does he answer it? And that's, I don't know, quite interesting. He's doing a little bit of a double take. Should she have taken the stand?
In hindsight, as I argued in my closing argument, hindsight can be 20/20, right?
So doesn't it sound like he's saying, yeah, maybe she should have taken the stand?
I don't know if it would have mattered. The jury got to hear an unbelievable number of hours of unfettered interrogation. She answered questions till they had no more questions. Some of those questions, in fact, were posed by her lawyer in those recorded interrogations. So whether or not she needed to say anything, what could she say that she had not said during those interrogations? They would have just...
So I've got to say, my opinion is that when you're on trial for murder or conspiracy, and even in Hannah's case, involuntary manslaughter, if you elect not to testify, I think that is not a sign of I'm convinced I'm innocent. Because I can tell you, a lot of people who are convinced that they're innocent, that are innocent, will testify, and they'll be a little bit like Mamie Mitchell was today on the stand in the Rust case, and some of the other people. So if you are sitting there for days, this is a really long trial, and then you decide, oh, I don't actually have anything to say. All these people are talking about my life and my partner and my feelings and what I said. I don't really have anything to say about it. Well, that's not a very good look, because I would. I don't know if how you guys feel. Thanks so much for that. I really got no idea what that exactly is. Is it Norwegian kroner? But it looks good. But thank you very much for that.
Asked her, well, you said this on this date and this on that date. She answered every one of their questions. My view, she shouldn't have said anything. But that's what I look for in hindsight. I did not represent Michelle at that point. But we'll go forward. We're going to challenge whether or not the trial had errors that should be reconsidered. And if not reconsidered in this court, then we'll go to the appellate or Supreme Court. Thank you.
So if I was a defense attorney, and I don't think I would want to be a defense attorney, but if I was a defense attorney, let's say I was in his position, and let's say I suspected that she may have done something, in a sincere way and in an honest way, I would think that the best solution in this not very good situation is that she testifies, and maybe a juror will sympathize with her. Who knows? We may even have sympathized with her. We've all been in that position where someone comes along and ruins our fairy tale. I don't know if you have, I have. Someone comes along and upsets the apple cart, and your life is devastated, right? And I'm certainly not justifying being emotionally compromised and committing a crime, but I think all of us have felt emotionally compromised, and we know what that feels like. And so, certainly in terms of that aspect, that sort of sympathy vote may have just slightly changed at least one of the jurors' minds. The problem with that is, if there's any hesitation that was there to begin with, a blistering cross-examination can cement someone's guilt. That's the problem. And so the fact that you are so scared that that's going to happen, that you don't testify, seems to me like consciousness of guilt. I don't know whether you guys think that that's fair to say. You might just say it's just generally good legal practice to put a client that is accused of murder to have them not testify, right? Do you guys want to just watch the verdict in a little bit more slow motion, where it's actually announced? Should we just go to that?
Of the kid of the state of Connecticut versus Michelle Troconis, have you agreed upon a verdict?
Yes.
Will the foreperson please rise and identify himself? Everyone else can have a seat.
Now, have you noticed for the first time in this whole trial, the seating arrangements have changed? Now Michelle is in the middle. Usually it was this attorney sitting next to Schoenhorn. This time she's basically out of the sight of the camera. That's a sly little strategic move so that the camera can't see her expression.
Will the defendant, Michelle Troconis, please rise and face the jury? In file number FST CR 200241178T, State of Connecticut versus Michelle Troconis. What say you, Mr. Foreperson? Is she guilty or not guilty of the first count of the information charging the defendant with conspiracy to commit murder in violation of Connecticut General Statutes, Section 53A?
So do you notice she's still got a kind of hearing aid in her, it's still being translated. Now, does she really need the verdict translated? Does she not know what guilty or not guilty means in English?
48A and 53A-54A, subsection A.
Guilty.
What say you, Mr. Foreperson? Is she guilty or not guilty on the second count of the information to the charge of conspiracy to commit tampering with physical evidence in violation of Connecticut General Statutes, Section 53A-155, subsection A, subsection 1?
Guilty.
What say you, Mr. Foreperson? Is she guilty or not guilty on the third count of the information to the charge of tampering with physical evidence in violation of Connecticut General Statutes, Section 53A-8, subsection A?
Guilty.
What say you, Mr. Foreperson? Is she guilty or not guilty on the fourth count of the information to the charge of conspiracy to commit tampering with physical evidence in violation of Connecticut General Statutes, Section 53A-48, subsection A, and 53A-155, subsection A, subsection 1?
Guilty.
What say you, Mr. Foreperson? Is she guilty or not guilty on the fifth count of the information to the charge of tampering with physical evidence in violation of Connecticut General Statutes, Section 53A-8, subsection A?
Guilty.
What say you, Mr. Foreperson? Is she guilty or not guilty on the fifth count of the information to the charge of hindering prosecution in the second degree in violation of Connecticut General Statutes, Section 53A-.
So can you see there, she's actually put her head on Schoenhorn's shoulder. And while that's certainly a tragic portrait, again, it just shows the emotional intensity of this particular defendant. You know, I've seen many verdicts, including in person. I was there when Caitlin, was I? I'm just trying to think if I was there when Caitlin. I wasn't there when Caitlin Armstrong was found guilty. I did see it, but I was in court throughout, and she showed no emotion throughout the whole thing. I was there when Henry van Breda was found guilty, and he basically just gulped, but otherwise showed not a flicker of emotion. And there are some people who show some emotion. Think about O.J. Simpson. He sort of gave a bit of a smile. This is quite a big show of emotion compared to the average. I don't know if you guys would agree. Would you agree that this is a above average emotional defendant?
165, subsection A, subsection 3, and 53A-166.
Guilty.
Oscar was also very emotionless. It was almost, I got the feeling that he already knew what the verdict was. I'm talking about the original verdict. Now, do you notice how this is kind of constructed, that at no point do you kind of see her face? Do you notice that?
You ladies and I'm sorry, one moment. The court will then accept the verdict.
The verdicts are accepted and recorded.
Your Honor, I'd ask that the jury be polled, please.
You have the polling document, Madam Clerk.
I will call upon you one at a time and ask you to rise and remain standing when called.
Obviously, we won't get to see them.
Is it your verdict that the defendant, Michelle Troconis, is guilty to the information of the charge of conspiracy to commit murder?
Yes.
Is it your verdict that the defendant, Michelle Troconis, is guilty to the information on the charge of conspiracy to commit tampering with physical evidence?
Yes.
Is it your verdict that the defendant, Michelle Troconis, is guilty to the information on the charge of tampering with physical evidence?
Yes.
Is it your verdict that the defendant, Michelle Troconis, is guilty to the information on the charge of conspiracy to commit tampering with physical evidence?
Yes.
Is it your verdict that the defendant, Michelle Troconis, is guilty to the information on the charge of tampering with physical evidence?
Yes.
Is it your verdict that the defendant, Michelle Troconis, is guilty to the information on the charge of hindering prosecution in the second degree?
Yes.
Is it your verdict?
Do you notice anything kind of unusual about what you're seeing here? What is different to this view of the defense table compared to how we've usually seen it? Right? Answer, well, the number of law enforcement, right? And I think you've all seen that incident where the one dude runs across the court and dives at the judge. It's basically to ensure security in terms of the defendant. There's a little bit more security usually when there's a verdict read, and when you're in court and that's the case, it definitely makes the hair kind of stand up on the back of your neck.
Verdict that the defendant, Michelle Troconis, is guilty to the information on the charge of conspiracy to commit murder? Is it your verdict that the defendant, Michelle Troconis, is guilty to the information on the charge of conspiracy to commit tampering with physical evidence? Is it your verdict that the defendant, Michelle Troconis?
So you can hear that this juror is female. I don't actually know the composition of this jury, how many jurors are male and female, but does this juror sound relatively young?
Guilty to the information on the charge of tampering with physical evidence? Yes. Is it your verdict that the defendant, Michelle Troconis, is guilty to the information on the charge of conspiracy to commit tampering with physical evidence? Yes. Is it your verdict that the defendant, Michelle Troconis, is guilty to the information on the charge of tampering with physical evidence?
Okay, 3 men, 3 female. So let me ask you guys, if you could wave a magic wand, let's say you want to get Michelle off, who do you think would be the most understanding? What sort of profile would probably kind of not understand, but sort of be more forgiving, or more cynical, or more careful in a scenario where someone has committed adultery? Do you think it would be a younger woman or an older woman, or a woman or a man, or an older man or a younger man? What do you think? Someone who's married or someone who's single? What do you think would be the ideal profile to get your client off in terms of a juror?
Evidence. Is it your verdict that the defendant, Michelle Chaconis, is guilty to the information on the charge of hindering prosecution in the second degree?
So there's some quite interesting comments here. Someone says a younger male, I guess, unmarried. Quite a few have said not married. Glow with the Flow says cheaters. I think that's quite a good. But look at that comment, older single man. An older single man. So it's interesting that you kind of get the idea that an older woman would be less forgiving, and perhaps even less forgiving than a younger woman, but that a man might be somewhat forgiving. You guys, are there any guys here that agree with that? Sharon says a single female. Are there any guys who agree with that? Because I must say, I don't think I ever really felt sorry for Michelle Chaconis. Catherine says an older married man. So there's quite a lot of debate here. Darren says a woman who cheated. So maybe not necessarily a divorced woman, but maybe a single woman. So maybe a single woman might be your best bet. Kind of a tough question, right? Quite a tough question. So I'm not going to go through all the jurors responding to this. We're going to go to a couple of minutes later.
The court to maintain the current bond. She has a teenage daughter that she is, and at least for the time being, remains the primary caregiver for her. She's appeared at all times. Her family all live in the United States. She's an American citizen.
So do you know if her daughter ever attended trial? As far as I know, her daughter didn't. Nicole, I don't think she ever appeared in court.
And I ask that the court not increase her bond and let her remain at liberty until sentencing. Thank you.
So the bond set only on docket number ending in 1178.
I would refer to the clerk, Your Honor.
I could answer that question. The first docket
The court is
number.
going to refer to the clerk.
We did a motion for joinder. The other two cases are closed out. So everything's on 1178.
Thank you.
So two questions for you guys. Number one, do you think she should get bond? And number two, do you think she will be able to get bond, meaning will she be able to raise that amount of money?
And does the court wish to know how much there was on the other cases as well, or no? 'Cause-
Well, it's only one docket number.
Right.
The court is going to set the bond on one docket number.
Yes.
$6 million cash assurity.
So, I find this disappointing is not the word. I find this inappropriate. There's a certain point where finding out you're guilty is got to be shocking and traumatic. but lying on the desk like she is the entire time. And I mean, you've actually got to watch this and watch the minutes tick by, and she stays in that position. That to me is kind of the behavior of someone who's being really childish. You might say that doesn't apply to a criminal or something, but she's been in court for 32 days, right? This trial has gone on for 32 days. It's all about whether you're going to be found innocent or guilty. And now you're going to hide behind your lawyer and put your head on the table. I mean, I find it very immature. And once again, one's got to just ask, is that giving you any additional clue into who the real person here actually is? Is it, right? Anyway, that is it. At this point, she kind of gets shepherded out. Careful to not turn towards the camera. She's now going to be cuffed. She's cuffed while also not turned to the camera. The reason you have all these officers present is also to protect her from perhaps someone in the gallery. It's just to prevent an incident. Not quite sure what's happening here. I don't know if you can see her head's bobbing slightly. She does seem to be crying.
So we can do May 24th.
So what's being ascertained now is the date of sentencing. Bear in mind, the sentencing is also kind of a hearing. Factors in aggravation, and those factors would be that Jennifer has 5 children. Factors in mitigation, well, she's got a child. Also that she didn't actually commit the actual murder.
Perhaps that would be an inappropriate day, Your Honor.
Yes, if we could, please do the week after.
So
May 31st.
May 31st was announced as the sentencing, and
31st sentencing.
And I'm possibly going to be in court for that. I don't know whether they're going to change that.
We stand adjourned.
All rise. The Honorable Superior Court now stands adjourned. Everyone please.
But certainly, it's my intention to be in America in May, and to attend the sentencing. So we'll see if that happens. Obviously, if the sentencing gets postponed, bad luck for me. I've gone all the way to Connecticut, kind of for nothing. But I do plan to actually be there. So then I'll be reporting to you guys from outside the courtroom. So look out for that. I'll also be, obviously, when I'm in Connecticut, driving a little bit around, getting my own sense of this particular case, driving some of the distances and all that kind of thing. So I do that occasionally. The reason why this makes sense is not only did I cover this, but I've got some friends in Connecticut, and also when I fly from South Africa, I land in New York, and so this is just around the corner. Connecticut is also kind of in the same neighborhood as Gilgo Beach, not quite. It's a little bit of a drive, but it's a way to do a little bit of true crime investigating where you can hit 2 birds with 1 stone. So that's really just the thinking. Glow with the Flow says, I wish this case was over. It pretty much is over. The next part is just sentencing, and then maybe there's an appeal. I don't think there's going to be an appeal, but who knows? Where am I going to be in the US? Probably just the East Coast. But if you know me, I always get sucked into my travels. So It depends. It depends on what's happening while I'm there. Okay, so thanks a lot for joining me. I just want to remind you that the woman behind me is what this case has all been about. There's still the mystery of what happened to her body, what happened to her remains. And I must say that kind of gives this case such a dark quality. The fact that someone can be murdered kind of in broad daylight and then hidden away that you just can't find her. I just find that kind of terrifying. And so I don't know, I guess I'm going to be thinking about that question when I'm in Connecticut, driving in that sort of area. But anyway, our thoughts certainly go to Jennifer herself, to her children, to her family. I have to say, for me personally, when her mother took the stand, I kind of got a feeling I was seeing Jennifer. I kind of got a sense of Jennifer. Her mother smiled, was quite congenial, was quite gentle, was quite sweet. And then I also got a really strong sense of her through the nanny. I really got a sense that the nanny couldn't believe what Fotis did to her, just in terms of having the affair, but also that the nanny chose her side, because you kind of get the sense that she knew Jennifer was a good person. She chose like the good side, and ultimately she did. Fotis was the bad side, the bad seed. Again, thanks guys for joining me. We've just gone over the 1 hour mark. I've got to get to sleep so I can run in a race tomorrow. I just want to thank everyone for being here. Appreciate you guys jumping over from the previous live. I'm probably only going to do the next live Sunday, Van Gogh Letters 76. So if you guys are addicted and you want to hear my voice and you're interested in Van Gogh, go to Team Peachtree and we'll be dealing with Van Gogh Letters episode 76 on Sunday. So look out for that. Okay, thanks a lot, guys. Glow with the Flow says addicted. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks to those who followed this case with me throughout. I hope you found it to be worthwhile and to be insightful and to be intelligent, sort of intelligent, educated discussion of what we're seeing in a whole host of areas. The statements that are made, the legal strategies that are employed, the types of witnesses who testify and the sort of efficacy of their testimonies, all that kind of thing. All sorts of details. You know, sometimes we learn new vocabulary. Sometimes we are surprised by how the judge responds to things. I must say, I really liked the judge in this case. I actually found him to be one of the best judges I think I've seen so far. So that really was quite interesting. I wonder what the Draconis family thought of him. He certainly didn't seem to take a lot of. He didn't seem particularly positive towards Schoenhorn, but I think understandably so in some ways. You know, I don't know if you noticed, he sort of cut him off in this verdict section where he said, "We want to get the answer from the clerk, not necessarily from you." Anyway, Eleni says the judge was spectacular. Just a couple of your comments. Penelope, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Terry's put the link to Team Peachtree. Just a really big thank you to the mods, and probably the most important mod that I want to thank is Stephanie, because it was actually Stephanie who kind of convinced me to cover this case. So although you're not here right now, thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, maybe Stephanie and I will take you guys on a tour. So when we're in Connecticut, you might see us on camera referring to some of the places in this case from the perspective of actually being there. So we'll see. Okay, so that is it. I'm off to Dreamland. I hope you guys have a really good weekend, and I'll see you guys later. So that's it from me. Cheers, guys. Thanks.